The spoon proves mightier than the bars at supposedly escape-proof Alcatraz prison.
It's one of these myths that go around for decades already, that everyone wants to be solved.
It's the most iconic prison escape in American history. On the night of June 11th, 1962, 3 Alcatraz inmates set out in a raft made of raincoats into the treacherous waters of San Francisco Bay. They were never seen again.
They disappeared, so you couldn't ask for a better ending, right? To keep it going forever.
Now, Dutch scientists Olivier Hoes, Rolf Hutt, and Fedor Barth want to determine what happened to the escaped convicts.
Science on an old mystery. They claim they solved the mystery of Alcatraz.
They've come to San Francisco.
You don't want to have to heddle for your life in the last bit while you're dragged out there.
To test their theory and ride their own raincoat raft to freedom.
They have one shot at it, and it's got to work. Most people want them to make it. People want people to be a hero. And so you have a very difficult challenge, and you make it. That's a hero story.
Secrets of the Dead was made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
In Holland, 10 million people live below sea level, a precarious setting that's made the Dutch world leaders in flood management. So when coastal engineer Olivier Hoes was called to San Francisco to predict how rising sea levels will impact that city in years to come, it was just another job.
The actual bay is rather shallow. It's just 4 to 5 meters deep. But in the center, it gets much deeper. It's about 20 to 30 meters deep. Every time that when the tide is going in or out, there's one big valley of water flowing in and out every time.
Using state-of-the-art hydraulic software, Olivier created one of the most sophisticated flow models of San Francisco Bay ever built.
So I saw his screen with all the little arrows for the water movement and then Alcatraz bang in the middle, and I thought, this is a story and a research waiting to happen.
Colleague Rolf Hutt realized if you could use 3D computer modeling to forecast future bay conditions, you could also use it to look into the past.
Science is about finding stuff out. So this is a historical study. Normally, we study future scenarios, what could happen if. And that's where we build all our models for. Science is about using expertise in research that's actually relevant for policymakers and the future, but it helps us understand something as cool as the escape from Alcatraz.
Alcatraz, the Rock. This Civil War fort turned maximum security prison was said to be unbreakable. The men sent here, men like Whitey Bulger and Al Capone, were just as tough.
You're talking about 25,000 men in those days in federal prisons and 250 on Alcatraz. So they were the most aggressive, most assaultive, sometimes most mentally ill 1%.
Jolene Babiak was just 15 the night of the escape. Her dad was acting warden. In 1962, she called Alcatraz Island home.
The siren woke me up. I was late for school, and my first thought obviously was, that can't be an escape attempt. But of course, I knew that in my heart that it was. I met my mother on the stairs, and she was all kind of pumped up, and she said, "Get dressed, there's been an escape."
At sunrise the next morning, it became clear that the rock had been broken. Convicts Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin had used sharpened spoons to dig through their cells. They left false grills and dummy heads behind as cover. climbed up a 3-story utility corridor, punched through a ceiling ventilation shaft, and ran across the cell-blocked roof. Then they scrambled down a 4-story stovepipe, evaded guard towers, made their way down an embankment, and slid into the frigid waters of San Francisco Bay, leaving behind a handful of artifacts and one of America's most enduring mysteries.
If they made it, why, one hell of an achievement, I'll tell you that.
Everybody was rooting for Morris and the Anglins, and they still are.
Unlike many in Alcatraz, Morris and the Anglins weren't violent offenders. They were low-end bank robbers, sent to the Rock after repeated escape attempts at other prisons.
Morris was an interesting character. He'd been in prison almost every day since he was 13.
He also had what was listed on the test as the highest IQ.
John and Clarence Anglin grew up sharecropping alongside 14 brothers and sisters. They'd robbed their bank using a toy gun.
Morris kept the Anglins in line because I think they were boisterous and talky and wanted everybody to know that they were cool.
It's the best way to escape, but the question is, the best place is still to go here, because there you have room
To
go
tackle
left.
the mystery of what happened to Morris and the Anglins, the Dutchmen used old tidal charts to build a 3D model that recreates the currents from the night of the escape.
So the tide is taking all the water out and pushing it all
They
the
then
way
called in friend and colleague Fedor Bart, an expert in particle tracking.
Particles sounds really technical, but in this case, that would just be a raft with 3 people in it. And what would happen given the tides? Where would it go?
I took the computer model from Olivier and I put an extra computer model that simulates human behavior and actually adds paddling behavior. That's the thing that I created.
The resulting model enabled them to track the paths of 50 virtual rafts, launching from Alcatraz on the night of the escape. What they discovered is the first scientific proof the men could have survived.
Our study revealed that the timing was crucial to get to the shore on the other side, that it actually depended enormously on when they left.
To escape and survive, the inmates would have had to launch during a narrow window between 11:30 p.m. and 12 midnight. If they did, the findings suggest the inmates could have ridden the outgoing tide to an unexpected place. For decades, common wisdom said that the escapees headed for the landmass nearest Alcatraz, Angel Island. But the Dutchmen think this would have been a fatal mistake. Based on the currents, that trajectory would have swept the men out to sea.
The actual finding is that they couldn't use the tides to leave Alcatraz just on time so that they didn't have to paddle that far. So Horseshoe Bay was the most likely destination according to our research and not Angel Island.
The first morning of their investigation, the team is headed to Horseshoe Bay, near the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Het is wel zo'n welkom in Amerika beeld. Oh, even een foto.
5 days from now, the tides and currents will match what the inmates faced back in 1962.
Als je het zo ziet, valt het wel mee met het water. Als het zo kalm is als dit, dan komt het toch wel goed.
Fedor, Rolf, and Olivier plan to launch their own homemade raft and put their theory to the ultimate test.
So they launched over there near the chimney, right? Yes. And the tide would have taken them here into Horseshoe Bay.
Yeah, the current should take you right into this bay.
Yeah, but if you time it wrong, you get this funnel being
Sucked out.
You're being pulled out, and you just die of hypothermia over there, or sharks.
I'm actually more concerned about these boats.
Oh, you mean the big cargo boats?
Exactly, because if we are in the middle of the shipping lane...
Then we have the right of way, because we don't have power. That's how it works, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm more concerned about the boat, actually putting the boat into the water and having it stay afloat for an hour.
If you look at the San Francisco Bay, it's actually quite an interesting bay because it sucks in all this water and spits it out through this narrow channel just below the Golden Gate Bridge.
A deep underwater canyon cuts right in front of Horseshoe Bay. It creates a narrow 300-foot wide wall of water flowing in and out through the Golden Gate. This intense band of current poses the biggest risk to the team.
It looks more or less like a highway of water that's going in and out every time. And one of the things that we have to take care of is that we have to pass that highway as soon as possible when we leave Alcatraz. Otherwise, we will be taken out to the ocean.
Fedor believes that even if they hit the wall of water, the human urge to survive will generate the power needed to paddle through it.
We knew that it would be the hardest part of the survival. I estimated that people would make a leap of faith. So the last 100 meters, paddle really fast. But I'm wondering now if it's even possible, if you have that urge to survive, to make that last 100 meters.
If Morris and the Anglins did hit the bay in the Dutch team's timeline, would their raft have stayed afloat for the hour the computer model says it would have taken to reach Horseshoe Bay? The only way to find out is to build the most historically accurate raft possible and launch in the same tidal conditions.
And at that time, the raft needs to be done. So that creates a limited time frame to actually build it and let it dry. Put some tension on the team, which may have not been representative of what the inmates had, because they had 6 weeks. But it put some tension on the team to get it done on time.
To build their raft, the team has called on Eric Humphreys. A longtime Nantucket boat builder, he's now chief of animatronics for the shop that creates Macy's magical Christmas window displays in New York City.
I made this the other day. Look at that, huh? Sparks.
Still, Eric's first love is the sea.
My day job currently is I make glittery elves, but I've always loved boats. I've always been, a sailor since I was a little kid.
The raft needs to be more than just buoyant. They want to build a raft as close to the original as possible.
It would be nice to see how they made their raft, whether they stitched it or not.
What kind of glue they used.
Exactly.
So before they launch into construction, Eric and Olivier need to see the artifacts the escapees left behind.
So here is photographic documentation from the escape.
Various tools made or stolen for escape. There's a whole treasure trove of things.
After the escape, the FBI recovered more than 80 homemade tools and other items the inmates spent months constructing.
Including files, spoons to chisel things away.
Hey, look, and drill bits. Man, these guys like building stuff. Have you ever made your own wrench? I've made so many things in my life. I've never made my own wrench.
The thing that struck me about those artifacts was the attention to odd details. Maybe if I was sitting in prison all day contemplating this, they would seem normal to me.
The periscope?
The thought was they stick the periscope out the little hole in the ventilator to see if anyone's looking.
The periscope is not something that you really need if you try to escape, and they put a lot of effort in making this periscope. And the same counts for the other tools.
This is one of 2 paddles. One was found on the cell block top roof. Okay. The other one was found floating in the bay.
The thing that struck me most was that the paddles had large bolts on the backside. And I can imagine that in the dark, if you do not pay attention, and you have these bolts sticking out to your raft, then you might make a leak in your raft without even having left Alcatraz.
Well, it looks like they used it as a cutting board. I bet you they cut the raft pieces on that. Look, those are knife marks.
Above all, Eric and Olivier want to confirm what the raft was made of and gather clues about how it was constructed. They've already found a vintage raincoat based on archival photos. The question is, will it match the real thing?
Oh, here he comes. Here he comes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we nailed it on the raincoats. The buttons are the same. The sleeves are the same.
Where was that label?
Should be a label. Right in the
label
lapel.
over there. Yep, that's it. Ours says
the 18561. And our label seems to match. Look at that. This raincoat's crying now. Look at that. There's your brother, baby.
Raincoats like these were common on the Rock, even on sunny days.
The joke on Alcatraz was that the birds were better shots than the guards. So guys would sometimes wear their raincoats out to the yard. And it would be a simple matter of wearing your raincoat out and then taking it off and somebody else picking it up.
Oh, and the inflator. That's what I was curious about. Straw. Look at that.
You can actually see their teeth marks on it.
Incredibly, the inmates crafted more than just the raft. They also made life vests.
If I'm thinking about getting out of prison, I'm just gonna build that raft and go. I'm not gonna screw around with a life jacket.
So this is a pontoon from the raft that wasn't actually used, correct?
Correct.
The pontoon remnant had what was clearly hand stitching.
I don't know. I get the feeling like this was like some kind of test. So I'm wondering if they just wanted to see what was the best construction technique given the materials they had. The ingenuity kind of goes counter to what you hear about a lot of these guys. Some of these guys are claimed not to be, you know, the sharpest pencils in the box. And here they are, they're making their own tools, they're making periscopes, they're making, you know, rafts in prison attics and somehow not getting caught. And I don't know if that speaks to these guys being really clever or everyone watching them being really, you know, not so clever.
It became so elaborate, right? A raft and then life jackets and, you know, paddles and masks. It just got bigger and bigger, right? There's safety in that sophistication, and that's often the case. The exciting, fun part is the inside the prison, the bragging rights, the ego, the fun, the hope. But once they hit land, not so fun.
The visit has offered up interesting clues. The inmates may have stitched the raft and used straws or hoses to inflate it. But how they glued the raincoats together remains a mystery.
I'm interested in this glue. It's that liquid plastic for book repair.
I don't know what that means, but somebody knows what that means.
Day 2 of constructing the raft. Eric and Olivier have asked adhesives chemist Bill Leach to come by and help them figure out what kind of glue might have been on Alcatraz in 1962.
What'd they use, and would the prisoners have something similar to it?
They're going to be dealing with materials that don't absorb water or solvent, so it's going to have to be a surface bond. It's going to have to bond materials that are likely to stretch a little bit.
Glue that stretches normally serves an industrial purpose. It makes sense they'd have access to it, because the Rock wasn't just a prison. It housed Alcatraz Industries, cranking out furniture, shoes, and gloves for the U.S. Army.
My understanding is they had carpentry, they had some sort of boot shop for rubber boots, and some sort of furniture shop.
So they may have been fairly bright guys who had connections and somebody would have told them, don't go to the furniture department for your adhesive, go to the shoe department.
There, they would have found a waterproof glue perfect for the job.
Yes, here we go, here we go. Bisolus polychloroprene, bingo.
Bisolus polychloroprene, otherwise known as contact cement.
And the contact cement, what seems the most likely that they would have, because not only do they need lots of it to make a raft, there needs to be so much of it they can steal this large quantity of it without people going, where's all the glue?
But according to at least one Alcatraz guard, stealing glue on the Rock might have been easier than it seems.
They really didn't keep track. The other penitentiaries on that, we kept track of the contact cement. But at Alcatraz, we really didn't. My recollection, it was 1 gallon cans. And they might have get some of that old used glue too, those cans.
With stolen contact cement, the inmates would have needed more than 50 raincoats to build their raft. But for Eric and Olivier, vintage raincoats aren't an option.
We looked at making the raft out of the actual jackets that the prisoners used, but one, they're kind of, very difficult to find. And two, the material seemed to be, after, 50 years, seems to be rotting. I think this is the closest you can possibly find it for a modern equivalent.
It's the same thickness. It says it's PVC.
PVC, that's important because that's what it would have been in 1962.
You gonna come with us?
Oh, I'm busy that day.
We'll get you a little drink umbrella.
With glue and materials set, they have 3 days left to craft a historically accurate design and get the job done.
I think some people are slightly nervous about the timing of it. I'm not. For my job, there's always a deadline, and it's always something that no one's done before, and there's always problems, but in the end, it gets done. It's kind of like an all or nothing, You're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly.
Well, raincoats.
Raincoats.
This is the actual raincoat that they've used. I got some documentation.
Yeah, right here.
Oh, here. Okay, the conspirators realized that once they had reached the water's edge, it would be no mean feat inflating a 14 by 6 foot life raft by mouth.
That's a really big raft.
5 jackets, 5 jackets, 2 jackets, and 10 jackets for the floor. So 22 jackets at least.
I'm gonna use this sleeve here for our test. We're gonna make a tiny miniature pontoon out of this. These fumes, I don't know about you, buddy, but I am feeling them. How do you want to seal it after the straws are in there?
So I can fold it backwards and put it under, for example.
Pretty clever. Wow. And it's holding air. Briefly. Oh, yeah, right here. This is what I was worried about.
Making the pontoons airtight is turning out to be a challenge.
There's your leak. This seems no problem. It's this fold-up seam.
Sure.
Had nothing to do with the straw. It was leaking through all the seams. That is, disappointing.
And so if you look at how Olivier and Eric built the raft, there's a lot of choices you can make to make it better. And all these choices that you can make try to stick to the historical accurate side of them. And that makes the raft less floatable, but it makes it much more realistic.
We're gonna have to figure a better way of sealing that.
Although the actual raft was never found, the stitched life vests recovered after the escape were surprisingly well built.
After the escape, they found these life vests. They wanted to test them, so they put weights on them, inflated the life vests until it lifted the weights off the floor, and they held air for hours, which is kind of amazing.
Eric now thinks the stitching on the life vests was probably critical to the evolution of the raft itself.
Who knows how many life vests they made? That could have been the, 400th life vest. And the first one didn't work. It looked like our bags that we tried. And I assume once they've got that worked out, they transferred that knowledge and used it to build a large ocean-going raft.
And at first, everyone just kind of ignored it because, stitching is kind of a pain in the butt. And we're hoping it was like a mistake. But it's becoming clear that the stitching is necessary to keep the air in.
As Eric pushes ahead with building the raft, the others are meeting someone deeply interested in their work.
They get sucked into this current. It's really strong.
More than 50 years after the escape, the U.S. Marshal Service is still hunting Morris and the Anglins. Mike Dyke has been on the case for the past 13 years.
Every piece of evidence that comes up, every lead that comes up is evaluated. Even if something coming up this long after the escape could determine whether we need to continue to focus efforts on looking for live people or try to find remains of people who might have washed ashore, 50 years ago.
They're excited to share their own findings, but they really want to gather details from Marshall Dyke about the time the raft hit the water.
There's no way to know for sure. That's a big variable when they left. There was a noise at 10:30, so that's what time we assume that they finally were able to get out the top.
Yeah, and then they had to go over the roof, down that pipe.
Over the fence.
Over the fence.
Over the fence. And they would have had to get the raft over the fence without
tearing
puncturing it on the barbed wire.
And then inflating it. So at least looking at an hour.
It could have been that long.
Yeah, so then the 11:30 window.
If they escaped us this time, then it actually ends up here. So that's our current scenario we're going with.
The 3D model is really useful because previously there was a couple of cartoon-type drawings of it. Other than that, you don't see an actual live view of what the currents were doing that night. So this is helpful in understanding what happened that night and hopefully come up with a more viable answer to what I've been doing for the last 13 years.
So at 10:30, a noise was heard. That is what the marshal told us. That gives us an anchor point. So it's really important that we know what happened step by step so we can determine when they entered the water.
To accurately recreate the timing of the escape, the Dutch team is heading back to the rock for expert insight.
Our research really focused on recreating the tidal situation that these escapees experienced. But to know that, we need input from the historians at Alcatraz to know what happened step by step so we can determine when possibly they could have entered the water.
Rolf and Olivier are meeting Alcatraz historian John Martini.
That's where Clint Eastwood and the others come down in the movie Escape from Alcatraz.
Who will help them retrace the path of the escape.
This is the access to the cell house. So this was the cell of Alan West, who, some people consider to have been the fellow who came up with the whole concept.
Of all the characters involved, Alan West is the least known, but arguably the most important.
West didn't get mentioned in the newspapers because he didn't go. He got stuck behind.
Unable to punch through his cell in time to join Morris and the Anglins, it was West who told the FBI the details of the plan, including the fact that the men intended to paddle to Angel Island.
There was a misconception that Morris was the mastermind of the whole plan. More than likely, West at least initiated it.
He was the most dangerous. A prisoner told me West didn't walk, he slithered.
That's the hole that they excavated to get out. They drilled a great big rectangular perforation in the wall. And then once they had weakened the wall, then they were able to break out large eggs relatively rapidly.
Chiseling through a foot of concrete was a tough and potentially noisy job. But thanks to the prison reform movement of the early 60s, Alcatraz was now offering art classes and music hour.
The music hour then just became a cacophony of sound. And probably when they did a lot of their digging.
Holy moly. The concrete over here is really bad.
Despite the rock's fearsome reputation for being inescapable, by spring 1962, the aging prison was falling apart.
The toilets in the cell house were plumbed with salt water. So salt water was coursing through those pipes for over 50 years. Plumbers would go in there to fix them, and they would disintegrate.
So you were constantly having, flooding salt water.
And that would destroy your concrete and your rebar.
Want to go into the
corridor?
Corridor?
Yeah.
Sure, let's do it.
Wow.
The actual weakest spot in the concrete is close to the vents where they got through.
Saltwater erosion and shoddy construction along the base of the wall meant the convicts were digging through the weakest spot of their cells.
Once they got out here into the utility corridor, basically it's like a jungle gym of pipes and supports straight up 3 stories plus to a flat open area at the top of the cell block.
Every night for 6 weeks, the inmates climbed 3 stories through this web of pipes to a hidden loft.
We're standing on the roof of the top tier cells, and then above us is the roof of the actual cell house. This is just a void. This is where they set up their workshop.
Here they would build the raincoat raft, periscope, drills, life vests, and tools that would make theirs the most sophisticated escape in American history. West had convinced the guards to let him work unsupervised in the loft during daytime hours.
Part of Alan West's whole cover story for being up here was that he was painting, and he indeed was. If you look right here at the ceiling, this is where Alan West left off painting. You can actually see the brush strokes.
West wasn't just looking for a place to build the raft. He was looking for a way to get out of the cell block and onto the roof.
They volunteered to do this cleanup up on top of the cells. Well, because they knew that if they could get up there, maybe look at those holes in the ceiling, that they could maybe go out of there, and they were certainly, and figure it was old and rusty, and it was. It was right on target.
The holes in the ceiling were old ventilation shafts, and the one above the loft workspace wasn't just rusty, it was the only one not cemented in place.
They hit on the idea of convincing the guards that they needed to put blankets to close this area off.
That was one of the things about Alcatraz, was it was spotlessly clean. I mean, they polished those floors. If you look at pictures of it, they were shiny. One day, West goes up to the top of the block, and with a little broom, he moved some dust down, And it didn't take long for the lieutenant to walk over that, or for a guard, or for a prisoner to complain, "Hey, there's dust in my cell. What's going on up there?" And so West just doubles back, and he says, I gotta work up there, and it's really dusty. Maybe we can hang some blankets.
Normally, they would put a guard with them at all times, but he said, just go and check on them now and then. Not a good idea, not with an Alcatraz convict. You're there, everyone was under the gun 24 hours a day.
But then there was no guard here watching him?
No, the feeling seems to have been, once he was led up here and he was locked in, what could he possibly do? Where could he possibly go?
I mean, they're on Alcatraz. What could possibly happen?
What could possibly go wrong?
On the night of June 11th, 1962, it was go time. By 9:30, West was having trouble breaking through the last bits of his cell when Frank Morris appeared asking for water.
He was thirsty, wanted a glass of water, so he handed him a glass of water through that little hole in the back of his cell that he was still working on, and then that was about 9:34.
It was the last time anyone would see Frank Morris alive.
There was a giant crash sometime around 10:30, which is apparently when the ventilator cap was pushed off.
So at 10:30, a noise was heard, and everybody goes with the story that that is the vent cover that falls onto the roof.
And this is the footprint of the pipe. This is the route down, and the FBI photographs show little black footprints running around down here as they were waiting for the other guys to come down. It's almost like a Bugs Bunny or something, except this was deathly for real.
Yeah.
Essentially what they were doing is they were following their nose towards the water.
What's your best guess for them leaving Alcatraz?
11:15, 11:30, and that's just a guess.
That would fit really nice with our model results. So then, because that is really in the time frame that if they went into the water, they had the best chance to reach Horseshoe Bay.
Back at the shop, time is running out. and they haven't even successfully inflated their first pontoon.
I went shopping. Black tape like they had.
All right.
I got hoses and tubes. It's gonna be like a raft hookah.
They know the inmates used stitching.
Ooh. You can hardly tell I've never sewed before in my life.
All right. First pontoon.
Think it's gonna hold air? Let's inflate it.
Try to inflate it,
Let's
yeah.
do it.
The moment of truth. If it doesn't hold air, they'll never make their tidal window.
If I pass out, leave without me, man. Save yourself.
The stitching, it seems, was the missing element.
No, we have bubbles over here.
All right, I think we can build a raft. I think it's gonna leak like a freaking sieve, and we're gonna spend the entire time pumping it up. Hell, you could probably even blow into it fast enough. I have more respect for them after attempting the work myself, you know, relatively ideal conditions. If I need more glue, I can go get more glue. I don't have to sneak it in from the cafeteria. No one's gonna shoot me, probably. So, and I'm having trouble. I don't think we're fitting 3 people in this thing.
If they are my size, it will fit.
What are you saying? Saying too much pizza? All right.
With the pontoon design set, it's a scramble to get the rest of the raft built, leaving just 1 day for the contact cement to dry. Across town, Rolf and Fedor have one last place to test their theory before facing the bay itself.
This swimming pool is representing the entire Pacific.
Yeah. So this is a large physical model of the San Francisco Bay and Delta system.
The tidal cycle over there is only 15 minutes. So what if I go out 1 hour after low tide? And then 15 minutes later, you can test, what if I go out 2 hours after low tide?
It's used in missing person cases in particular. When a body washes up on shore somewhere, the question's often asked, well, where did this person enter the water? And so the ability to go through a 12-hour tidal cycle in 15 minutes and watch where things go is one of the beauties of this tool.
Hey guys, look what I built. A little boat, little release mechanism, some tape, some super glue, some office supplies. But I think the tide is going out right now, which would be when we said that they went.
Okay.
I'm just gonna put it in. This is my kind of science.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We just had our floaty going with the tide. So this would be without pedaling.
So if they just let the raft take them where it would take them.
Yeah. So this is the tidal slack point. It should be slowing down.
Slack tide is the brief window of slowing current that happens between the incoming and outgoing tides.
You got to really time it around slack water. If it's not slack water, everybody goes out the gate. Yeah, I think if they went out the Golden Gate, it was probably history for them.
On the first attempt, without paddle power, the raft is swept out to sea.
Then you see exactly the same thing as in Amaldi. You go straight into the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge out into Pacific, you die. What we did in our computer model is we looked at the difference between what if you just go with the flow versus what if you pedal. But then, of course, I cannot put pedaling mice or I think even ants at that scale on it. So we did a final attempt, and in the final attempt, Fedor was holding an office fan that mimicked the northwards effect that pedaling could have.
Yeah, so this is when I think they had a chance because the currents are not that strong.
Not that strong.
The second time, Fedor uses an office fan to simulate the forward motion of men paddling the raft.
So I'm just giving it a bit of northern movement. In the last 100 meters, I had to turn up the knob to full speed.
When the raft approaches the strong band of current blocking it from Horseshoe Bay, Fedor cranks up the fan.
As if that last rush of adrenaline and, oh my God, we're gonna die, rush of adrenaline, gave them enough energy to do a final pedal and make it.
Oh, nice.
Oh.
Nice!
Hey,
there you go.
There we go.
That's how you do it. It was interesting to see that this flows actually ended up exactly where we predicted.
Okay, I want to see you do that in 2 days, for real.
But if they've got any kind of speed and the vessel doesn't sink, it looks very doable to me.
We should be able to make it, given that the boat holds and that there's no freight, whatever going in between. But from just a flow and water movement perspective, doable. We might live.
What they've seen here suggests their computer model is right. If the escapees were able to get past the invisible current of water blocking Horseshoe Bay, they could have survived. It also may have solved another mystery. After the escape, searchers found paddles and other debris near Angel Island, which gave rise to the theory the men made landfall there. But the Dutch model shows that when the tides reverse, items dropped in the surf off Horseshoe Bay are pushed right back to Angel Island.
Oh, here, yeah, look, this is Olivier now.
As they wrap up, the team gets a text from Olivier over at the tech shop.
So these are the pontoons. So the final thing is that the floor is going to be glued on top like that, and it's going to all be inflated, and it hosts 3 men.
There's going to be 3 chambers, the stern, aft chamber, and 2 large chambers in front, and they'll have their own inflator hose. So this way, each individual paddler can have their own hose, and you blow into it to keep ahead of any leaks that may occur.
With the raft finally done, they've asked Marshall Dyke to come by and take a look.
That seems
wow,
smallish.
It gets bigger.
Wow,
wow,
pretty big.
That would fit the 3 of us.
I have 100% confidence there'll be 0 leaks.
You know, they used a similar type glue. The dimensions, we believe, were accurate. I believe it was a very realistic portrayal of, you know, how things would have ended up.
So do you think you'd get in this thing?
I don't believe I would.
Ah, come on.
Given a trailing boat and...
If I was desperate, I would get in it.
I think if anything's going to fail on the raft, it's going to be a seam or it's going to get ripped on some unforeseen piece of metal someplace. I don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be some huffing and puffing into those tubes, but I really do think it's going to make it.
By 7 p.m. the next evening, they're headed to Alcatraz. The window to launch is between 8 and 8:30, a rare interval when the bay's complex tidal conditions will match those from the night of the escape.
Usually around sundown, when that inland valley cools off, this strong onshore breeze, abates and it gets nice. This year's an El Nino year and the weather's a little bit unusual, so the prevailing conditions may not prevail. As a result, what we're noting is that the wind is a little bit more south than usual from the south. With the early bit of the ebb kicking in, the chop is getting a lot rougher.
The water is rough. Winds are blowing at 25 knots. The team worries their raft won't stand a chance.
There's some pretty big waves, like some 60 centimeters to a meter waves with foam caps on that, and it's pretty scary for a little boat like us. So we're gonna wait as long as we can within that tidal window, hope that the sun going down, temperature difference between the sea and the land going down a bit, that the wind would ease, so that we have conditions that are as near as we can achieve today to what happened back in the day in '62.
I think it's a fair test of the concept. The guys that made the escape originally, maybe they were able to pick a night where it was calm, I don't really know. But I think that if they're able to pull this off today with all the challenges that are present, it really is a strong affirmation that, yeah, absolutely, this could be done.
San Francisco Bay isn't known for calm waters. With winds now hitting 30 knots, this will be the most realistic attempt ever.
I think that that's the problem with a lot of recreations is they kind of pick a perfect day. This is a very typical day, and the challenges are real.
Bogey-wise, it's now 10 to 8, but it's still pretty rough out here. Yeah, like 8:15, we'll probably go into the water. Need to start filling up the raft then.
When you guys first get into the boat, just give us an okay. So international, okay. Any type of major medical emergency, a fist up in the air.
A fist up in the air for me means end of this mission. It failed, get back into the boat. When I saw the raft coming together and being inflated for the first time, I grew more confident. But just before we launched our little raft, all that confidence went away when I saw these big waves. So we're gonna do this, guys. It's not that we can change anything now, so let's just do this. Let's see where we end up.
Go.
Careful.
Don't let go.
We're going. Drop.
Like Morris and the Anglins, their raft has never been tested.
Should I go in?
Will it hold up or disintegrate under the weight of 3 grown men?
Okay, guys. Jij geeft aan dat we omstaan, heel goed zoals we gaan. All right, it's 10 past 8. Yeah. All 3 of them are in the boat? Yeah, let go. Let go.
And they're off. Good luck, guys. See you in an hour. Looks like it's holding air. I mean, they're huffing and puffing, but they're going the right direction, and they ain't sinking. Their hair's dry. What more could they want?
According to their model, they will have to hit Horseshoe Bay around 9 p.m. That's when the tidal slack will slow the outgoing current and give them the best chance to paddle through the underwater torrent, blocking their way.
When we were floating in the bay, I really felt this is a great thing we're doing, putting science into reality.
We're about, what, 15 minutes in, 10 minutes in? They're a good long ways from Alcatraz, probably 20% there. There's a little bit of water in the boat, they said, and that's only from when they got in. I think the thing's holding up. Looks like getting out of Alcatraz is easy.
Yeah, everything's leaking, but we're holding up fine.
They only got one guy paddling, though. So other 2 people are inflating the raft constantly to keep up with the leaks that are in it.
We thought that when the sun would set, the waves would calm down a bit, like this one.
As darkness sets in, the seas don't calm. They get rougher.
They're about to hit some pretty good swells, the biggest we've seen so far. I'm not sure if it's wake from a ship or it's just the current going through this part of the channels, but I think they're going to get a little bit wetter now.
At 50 minutes in, they're hitting the wall of current they fear. Tidal slack hasn't slowed it nearly as much as they had hoped. The Dutchmen are at risk of being drawn out to sea.
60 minutes. Waves are getting a little stronger, and I believe they're starting to get sucked towards the Golden Gate. So if they want to make land, they have to paddle like crazy right now. According to the captain, if you're going to make it, you all got to paddle that way, because we're starting to drift towards the bridge.
If they do get pulled under the bridge, this experiment could turn deadly.
I think they're getting tired. Oliver had a cramp in his leg or his arm, had to rest for a little bit. And, you know, it's not over yet. These guys got to paddle. You guys see the boat over there? They got their light on? Aim for that light over there, that bright one.
Horseshoe Bay now lies less than 200 yards ahead.
So we're about an hour and 5 minutes in. According to GPS, we're making about 2.5 knots, mostly from the current. Unfortunately, that's all towards the bridge and not towards land. It looks like they're still trying to keep up the inflation, and they just have one guy, Oliver, paddling. I can see their destination. Very, very close. And they have stopped paddling and have just gone to inflating. I don't know if that means they're just getting tired or the leak is getting more serious.
Do you think that it is too dangerous already or not?
You're losing ground. Everybody can't paddle. I think it's...
No, the ground's over only at the bridge.
We're about an hour and 10 minutes in. We just had a chat with them and told them they all need to paddle. We just don't want them too close to the bridge. And if they get too close to the bridge, it's kind of game over.
Exhausted and accelerating toward the Golden Gate, an upheld fist signals it's time to turn back.
We're gonna go over and pick them up now, I think. We're coming. Missed us up. We're coming for you guys.
Pull yourself in.
The fader's in. He's stuck in the raft.
Yeah. Hold the raft.
I'm holding it. Okay.
Just all right. Get the raft in. From my delay.
Stay fast.
Close. Okay, I'm calling it. They're dead.
We got them all on board. Everyone's safe. We got the raft.
Raft building-wise,
They could have done it. It's just that one guy battling, two guys blowing is not enough to get the speed to the north. And you can see that in our model. It's like a big column going in, and we should have been maybe to the north of that current before it went so narrow.
Like if you just get south of it, then you're basically doomed.
And that's what science is all about, is just learn more. If you just have one data point, one story, that's not really science. You need to have multiple data points so that you can see what the influence of different factors is. So what we just did is, given the exact tidal circumstances, our data point says they would have drifted to the gate.
We estimated below that would take over an hour, so that was correct. But I thought we would have a bit more time to get in here.
So the things we computed actually happened, but I think we're mainly missing this leap of faith, this urge to survive. And I think if you're really escaping, you have much more adrenaline. So now they've come through this experience, I still think they would have been able to make it.
And so, a bit unfortunate.
But look what we did. We managed to do it for 95%. We were approximately 50 meters from the Golden Gate.
95% is usually scientifically significant, right?
These guys were very capable. I think the raft could have theoretically made it, but I don't think it did. I think they're dead. I think they're floating out there or on the bottom. For the same reason everyone else is, where are they?
For the team, it's been a disappointing but insightful night. For former prison guards, the results reinforce a gut instinct they've had for over half a century now, based on the smallest of evidence pulled from the bay just days after the escape.
I was given authority to go out and start looking for them, and going around and around and around. They'd see these items floating, and then they would retrieve it and bring it in and try to dry it out. And we got, surprisingly enough, quite a few correspondence that they had, maybe with their parents or a loved one. Things that were very dear to them. It could be a photograph of their father or mother or a loved one, maybe their girlfriend. It's items that they would really want to keep with them, but I think they had to give it up.
More than 50 years ago, 3 men took a desperate gamble.
And I've talked to many, many people, and they really hope they've made it.
How do you feel?
Oh, hell, I wouldn't mind. It'd be all right. I'd like to know what happened to them.
But tonight, the Bay is holding its secrets close, and the mystery of Alcatraz